All right, another episode of the Dossier podcast. This is Jordan Chactel. I'm here with Brian Chau, the CEO of the newly formed Effort.News. Brian has a long background in AI and I think engineering, and has a really interesting, perspective in this space of investigative journalism. And I think he's onto something really interesting. How's it going, Brian?
Yeah, amazing. Great to join you.
Awesome. So I just kind of like stumbled upon Effort.News in my X feed. Can you tell me, what the vision is for Effort.News and
Yeah, a
you know
lot of
what?
people having that experience.
Mhm.
It's great. But the vision is that right now, there's so many stories, the crown's laying in the gutter, that have been sitting around for 5 years or more that no one's reported on because it requires going through a ton of documents. Not many people are going to do that. And so there are these massive stories, not just by my opinion, but from, the entire reaction to it, these massive stories that have just been laying around that no one's found, and now we're finding them. So that's the big takeaway.
Yeah, so I went on your homepage and your rollout. You had like four or five big, interesting scoops. What's if you can take us, behind the curtain? How exactly, what can you reveal about how Effort News functions? How you use, the latest, I guess, AI tech to kind of explore unexplored topics, and like what is the relationship between kind of like the human and the computer there?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that most people who try to do AI journalism, they just try to make AI do the writing. And what we really quickly found was that the AIs suck at writing. I don't know why. They've improved a lot in other areas, but right now it's just like still on the floor. Maybe it'll change, but right now the writing quality is really bad. And so we write all of the articles by hand. Um, what AI is really useful for is reading, these millions of documents, financial records, legal records, things that would take myself like years, if not like my entire life, to comb through and put together. Okay, what are some newsworthy patterns? What are some newsworthy trends? Sometimes it is that simple, like with the 1.2 billion refugee grant story. We downloaded a copy of the HHS grant table, and then I literally said, "Find newsworthy stories." I added a little bit more criteria, but massive spikes in grants, for example, which is what it found. But to a large extent, we can give a very open-ended question using a fixed data source and get very reliable answers. And the other thing, this is somewhat different, is that we can use that to map across multiple data sources. And this is something that would have been very hard to do. It's something we did with state bills in the UK lobbying article. It's something that we did with obfuscated transactions in the degrowth article. But there's a ton of ways where information is kind of loosely hidden. It's like you need to disclose it, but you can disclose a minimal amount, and it's hard to put everything together, where it's become not so hard to put everything together.
So you think that basically, the corporate, the legacy media, do you see that they're not using these tools efficiently, and they're basically just using it to churn out poor writing assistance instead of research tools?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you like? What kind of like? How can you differentiate yourself? Because these technological tools are now massively distributed. Is it something about, I guess, like the core functions of your team that you can kind of separate yourself from, like, I guess, a unique insight into, fact gathering?
Yeah, I think everyone asks that question. I think in some areas where it makes sense, right? You look at like OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini. Are they really that different? It seems like they're all kind of converging, and they're constantly converging and trying to copy each other. It's this fascinating thing. But with Harvard News, I don't think there is anyone else to differentiate ourselves from. Like, who are we differentiating ourselves from? ProPublica? Like, it takes them, 10, 20 times the amount of time, literally, 5 to 10 years to put together these investigations. They basically do it all by hand. It's actually kind of impressive. They did this in like the pre-AI era, but they just clearly haven't caught up. And really, no one's caught up. Maybe that'll change, but right now it's just Effort News. It's the Effort News show all day, every day.
So, for those who are unfamiliar with your background and experience, what kind of got you to this point where you've been able to innovate in the space?
Yeah, so I started out as a regular machine learning engineer, software engineer. Did that for a few years, and it was this open question. I had tons of interests in some of these stories. I had tons of interests in where the world was going. I think once in a while, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you kind of look out at the world, you look out at the kind of vast horizon of what's going on, and you think like, oh, maybe what I'm doing is actually way too narrow. Maybe what I'm doing is like, maybe it's making a good living. Maybe it's like adding to the world GDP in its own kind of way, but doesn't really matter. And so I ended up first starting this blog from the New World, which is not really investigative journalism, more kind of like political theory, political philosophy, and that caught the attention of like more and more people online. Then later found this Org Alliance for the Future, which I think you've also heard of, and then I ended up leaving that and then working more in software for a bit, and then finally starting Effort News, where I think it's a nice combination of learning a lot about the technical aspects of optimizing our workflows and optimizing both the cost and the accuracy of what we're doing, but also a lot about the world and about really about secrets in the world. And it's like, there's this quote by I think Newton of like, I see the stars sparkle, and right now I'm the only person who knows why. I think it's not quite that grandiose, right? I'm not saying I'm Newton, but there is that thrill of like, oh, this is something I know. This is something that very soon everyone's going to want to know, and I'm going to be the one to bring it to them.
Yeah, it's interesting that given your engineering background and in the software space, I think it's that people need to have kind of that unique combo of understanding what's going on within the software, so you have a general sense of like what it's capable of, and then this journalist mindset to uncover important truths. It's an interesting combination because what I see often, especially with these Silicon Valley types, is that they have very niche interests, and what happens is that they like don't, they become kind of like very ideological, like specifically like these like effective altruists that just have like this like sci-fi world view, and it doesn't really become helpful, in advancing the journalism space. And I think it kind of like infects some of the products that they're using with these frontier models. I don't know if you saw this. There's an interesting story in the Wall Street Journal today about how like China's state-sponsored information is kind of like spilling over into American AI models, especially when people are searching in Chinese language, because so much of the information they've gathered comes from state-sponsored sources. So how do you like how do you think about that, and like in terms of your gathering your sourcing to uncover scoops? Like what kind of scoops are you looking for in general?
That's really terrible to hear. It's interesting. I can't actually read Chinese. It's big L to the people who are reading in Chinese, but it's fortunate that nothing like that happens at home. Do you know the context for this? Do you know the original like pre-Effort News scoop?
I do not.
Okay, so the way a lot of people kind of first heard about me and all the things I was doing in the AI policy world was I wrote this article about RLHF for political ideology. RLHF is this very common what's called post-training technique, way to take an existing AI model and change it. And in this case, it was changing the political views. So there was all these stories that were going around. This was in like the 2023, 2024 era. There were all these stories going around of like, oh, maybe AI is just biased because like Reddit is full of left-wing views or something like that.
Right.
Not true. Entirely false. And the way that we know this is that there were published papers by both OpenAI and Google talking about, number one, how they found the kind of default output of the LLMs problematic from a political perspective. How they actually it's kind of like an engineering paper, kind of going through the methodology, the systematic way that they changed that, and the goals, which was basically like left-wing views on diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of these sensitive topics. And I remember precisely, even to this day, like the exact quote from the OpenAI paper, which was, "The model conformed to our predetermined set of values." This was not an accident. This was not just like random left-wing bias. This was an intentional goal. Now, I think that in general, the companies have gotten better. They've gotten, number one, both more permissive. They don't deny as many requests, and number two, like closer, not completely neutral, but at least closer to neutral, less ridiculous.
My concern is that, not to get too political, but I think that a lot of this is they want to appease the White House, especially, the two dominant frontier
Oh,
companies.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And
They've been
my
doing that
concern
for
is that this
years.
will
Yeah.
all reverse once, in the next couple of years, if things don't go well for the White House, and then you have like this, the like basically AI turns into this like pre-Elon, hyper censorship X era. That's kind of a fear, that I'm.
Yeah, I think that's likely, and there was an executive order now repealed, but there was an executive order under Biden to enshrine diversity, equity, and inclusion within AI models, whatever that meant. That's like the text of the executive order, and all sorts of crazy stuff related to the Doomsday cult that you were talking about earlier. The Doomsday cult, SBF. I know you reported on this somewhat. I don't know how much context your audience have. That was like a crazy like Biden era like side plot. But yeah, there is a lot that is up in the air about AI policy in the next few years, especially if the White House changes hands in 2028.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that, from an outsider perspective, spent a lot of time in DC, but have never really integrated with the forces of Silicon Valley, San Francisco. And I know that you helped found Alliance for the Future, and you're very pro innovation. But on the West Coast, there's like this unique ideology specifically where it's like, what we call like the doomers or the safetyists. Can you kind of explain, where these people are coming from, how they get, these ideas in their head, and how it is so prominent in these dominant spaces, especially in these frontier companies?
It's this thing where like you don't have to be right, you just have to be early. Most of the people there, they'll like, it's so annoying, they'll constantly be talking about like, oh, we kind of started this all because we were the first people talking about AI. It's like, yeah, you guys had these like crazy sci-fi stories that inspired Sam Altman to do literally the exact opposite of all of you guys were saying. It's very funny. It's like all of them are like, oh, if you build AI, everyone will die. If AI will have cyber capabilities, everyone will die. It's just like constant, if Llama 2 is released to the public as an open source model, everyone will die. This is an official, that was actually an official White House request for comment filing by this org that was funded by one of the big doomer foundations, Open Philanthropy, now called Coefficient Giving. So they're literally telling the Congress like, oh, there will be like national security risks if Llama open sources Llama 2. This was a significantly worse model than like Llama 4, which is now open source, no problems at all, and in fact, very far from the best model at this point. And it's this like constant, never-ending fire hose of bullshit. Where it comes from is that all these people had these predetermined beliefs before AI even existed. They just read all these sci-fi stories, kind of like from their perspective, it would be like more sophisticated versions of the Terminator story. Really, I think that's kind of like self-aggrandizing. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger did a better job than like Eliezer Yudkowsky or whoever, which is one of the kind of figures in this world. Um, and yeah, they like formed all of their beliefs before they had any empirical evidence. It was just all based on sci-fi. And as the saying goes, you can't reason someone out of something that they didn't reason themselves into.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, like when you read their work, like this idea that, if you stack one more NVIDIA GPU, it's going to be like eventually there's going to be a breaking point at which like your intelligence turns against you and just sabotages everything you do. And getting like, I think they're so hyper focused on like this 0 to 1 moment. And they rebranded it a million times, AGI, ASI, and it's just
Yeah, this is one thing. This is something that's like very characteristic of basically like control movements that constantly make false predictions. I remember seeing this in economics. This was like part of my political awakening of this rebrand between like, oh, we'll have like endless frontier, we'll have continual managed growth into maybe it's just secular stagnation. There's not that much we can do about it, but maybe we can kind of like de-risk the financial economy. And then after that, it was more something like degrowth or ESG, where it's like we will have like this kind of managed economy where we'll accept some level of decline and degrowth. And it's like, no, you guys have tried this theory. You guys have kind of like warped it around and like pinged it back and forth over and over again, and you keep rebranding it because no one likes it and because empirical predictions have failed. It's the exact same thing. It's funny because like some of my friends and I joke around that like a billion, 5 billion open philanthropy dollars was was evaporated by like me and my friends writing Twitter threads, and it's kind of true, but it's in some cases like I don't really take credit for that. I'm kind of the messenger, but the message is that these people have fundamentally delusional, self-destructive and destructive to all of us ideas. And whenever people actually hear those things, they think, oh, this is terrible and authoritarian. We can go more into their policy proposals later, but it's like terrible and authoritarian, and no one would want this. And so they have to keep rebranding and then spending their money to create these new organizations, create these new like basically deceptions of where they're coming from and of their political viewpoints and so on as the administrations change, and this kind of constant rebrandings, this kind of constant like revolving door. And man, it's just tiring. It's just so tiring.
Yeah, I think that's what happens when when these organizations are just flooded with like anthropic equity, or in the case of coefficient giving, I think they got a lot of the founder of Ethereum donated like all these dog tokens that were worth like $1 billion.
That's Future of Life Institute.
Oh, Future of Life.
Coefficient giving is Dustin Moskowitz's thing.
Right.
Who is this person who I think he was like one of the co-founders of Facebook, who then like left and now has made coefficient giving his main thing, and is really a true believer. Is talked about like this term that they use called like P-doom. Like they think the world is literally going to end. It's not an exaggeration. Like it's not even like a climate change thing where it's like oh, there's going to be like natural disaster. It's like, okay. I think people have exaggerated that. I think people have especially exaggerated how solvable the problem was with things like solar panels and electric cars. But there was kind of an underlying like real concern there, at least from my opinion. Maybe you disagree, but it just ended up being the AI doom stuff just ended up being this like total, not just like exaggeration, but inversion of reality, where the reality is of course that the reality is of course that AI saves many more lives than it actually negatively impacts it. People developing new medical technologies every day, and the AI deaths that do occur are not like, oh, there's some kind of crazy AI agent. It's like, oh, someone is like using a drone in a war, and this is like, as opposed to like a conventional, guy with a rifle in a war.
It's interesting to see that, like, among the revolutionaries, that some of them have kind of been like infected by frontier model money, where it's like we want to pause, but we don't really want to pause. And then there's a group, the other group that's like, no, 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 really, we want to destroy this stuff and shut it all down. And what's interesting is that you find that some of these funding mechanisms are the same. So it's kind of like,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
you see like this weird ideological self-destructive impulse. Like the Anthropic Foundation donates a ton of money to this stop AI stuff, and if you talk to some of these leaders, they're like, yeah, we want to shut down Anthropic, but we're willing to take their money. So it's like this bizarre like PR marketing
Yeah,
play, but
here's an
also
interesting prediction for 2026 and 2027. We saw in 2024 that like the crazies were trying to coup the sane business people at OpenAI, and I think in Anthropic, the non-crazies will make their move, and they will try to coup the crazies in Anthropic. And I think like OpenAI, the dominant faction will prevail. In OpenAI, the sane business people sort of overcame the coup and kept the company going, and focused on creating better products. At Anthropic, I think they will kind of like spiral into like not even improving their products, spiral into just doing politics every day, and you can see the precursor to that with the DOJ scramble, where this. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been publicly reported, I think, but where it was basically a unilateral decision by Dario to tank the deal for essentially no reason, no actual business reason, for essentially ideological reasons. And this was this totally unforced error that you know if Anthropic were a regular corporation, may have put him liable for shareholder lawsuits, and I think very clearly substantively reduce the value of the Anthropic IPO if and when it comes.
yeah. So most of my audience knows, I'm a policy advisor for the Innovation Council, and they do a lot of great, pro AI, pro innovation work. And some of the hardest part of like convincing um, normal Americans about the benefits of this technology is the fact, like as you were talking about, that the leaders of some of these organizations are so malicious, deceptive, not doing a good job for making the case more broadly for the technology, and seeking, really, I think that some of them are just seeking to protect their own interests. But it's very interesting that you have this, preempt, the normies are going to launch a preemptive strike, or at least the smart business people in these organizations are going to launch a preemptive strike, learning from the lesson of the coup against Sam Altman. Is Dario considered one of the ideologues in this scenario?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So actually, it's interesting. Let me start with what we know for sure, what we can absolutely verify, which is that Sam Bankman-Fried, the chief ideologue, chief donor, and convicted fraudster, chief ideologue and chief donor of effective altruism, was the seed Series A and Series B lead for Anthropic. He led every round for Anthropic until the day he got arrested, basically. And and many people within the effective altruism community, or formerly within the effective altruism community, have told me that Dario was personally mentored by Sam Bankman-Fried. And actually, there's a lot of evidence in that,
Talk about an
in
effort news
Dario's
scoop
decision
coming up.
making itself. Because
Go ahead.
Dario, actually, this is something that almost no one remembers. Do you know what Sam Bankman-Fried was doing the moment up to him getting arrested?
I
Do you
remember
remember?
he had a conference in the Bahamas, but this was probably, or he was in the Bahamas, right?
He was mainly based in the Bahamas, um, but I think he was actually in the US. And do you know what he was in the US doing?
I don't know.
He was advocating for this law that would have created a regulatory monopoly on crypto exchanges. He was arguing for banning his competitors through this new regulatory agency that he would play a large part in creating. Does that sound
Sounds like the
familiar?
Anthropic playbook to me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's the same strategy. It's like not, I called this the Sam Bankman-Fried strategy. People were saying, the kind of effective altruists were saying, well, you can't just tie everything to Sam Bankman-Fried. No, this is not a coincidence. This is not like I'm just randomly tying things to Sam Bankman-Fried. This is what Sam Bankman-Fried was doing when he was arrested. This was so it's this amazing thing where people really have goldfish memories. I think that's another element of effort news is I kind of just like know where the bodies are buried. I kind of like pay attention to the stuff. It like haunts me like forbidden knowledge, like the King in Yellow or something. I just like can't sleep and then oh my goodness, they're getting away with it. maybe that's not such a great thing to admit on TV, but that is that is part of my motivation. Is like they can't get away with this.
No, I think it's a noble motive. Speaking of nobles and aristocrats, you had a really good scoop on kind of these European donors and financiers that are impacting specifically like American organizations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, are we talking about? It's funny. It's like I broke two stories related to this. Are we talking about degrowth, or are we talking about the British censorship?
I think like you had a story that I'm trying to pull up
Yeah, there's
about
two
like
of them.
these old families of aristocrats, like from 19th century money that were donating money to. Yeah, maybe I'm combining both stories in my head.
Yeah, this one's degrowth. So this is degrowth causes.
Right.
They are actually like this one. They're mostly keeping to their territory. It is mostly Europeans donating to other Europeans doing European policy. Although some of these figures, of course, constantly comment on American politics, like many such Europeans. And yeah, it's this fascinating story where we literally had 19th century heirs donate donate money through a Swiss bank account to hide their donations in
Right.
order to fund, degrowth and radically changing the direction, changing the rules of the global economy. Changing the rules of the global economy is the exact quote. And it's this fascinating thing where literally like Robert Bosch Stiftung 1886 auto business Lodz Foundation 1841 like luxury clothing Mava Foundation famous especially in Europe pharmaceutical company pharmaceutical empire Hoffman La Roche 1896. So these people who are like the grandchildren or the great grandchildren or the great great grandchildren of people who have made their money already, who have guaranteed like themselves and all of their future generations, like basically, for all like purposes of commoners, for commoners like us, basically infinite money, purely generational wealth. They're now advocating for these degrowth policies, and in many cases, using these Swiss bank accounts to hide that they are the ones doing so.
It's interesting because in Europe, old money is so much more common than new money because there's a regulatory environment and choose your country that basically makes it impossible to start a successful business and scale it into generational wealth for the next couple centuries, right? So that's why I think it's interesting to kind of bring that story into the fold because we have all of these powerful, well-funded organizations in America too that are pushing for policies that are going to turn us into this European theater where only the aristocrats will be able to deploy capital into things that are important to them. And that's my biggest fear, especially when we talk about AI policy, when we talk about innovation, is that people are going to fall into the doom or panic trap And the next thing you know, we find ourselves with the regulatory environment that Europe faces.
Yeah, and this was an explicit goal by several open philanthropy members, stated goal. And the logic is that if you have an AI monopoly, then the monopoly is easier to regulate. They explicitly drew the parallel as well to the FDA, which, crazy thing to be saying in 2026. Crazy thing to be saying, or I think they actually said in 2025. But crazy thing to be saying in a time when I don't think anyone of any political party thinks that the FDA is managed well, and it's precisely because of these incentives, precisely because of regulatory capture, because these organizations become captured by the incumbents, and the incumbents both have the incentives to create an uneven playing field, an unfair playing field for themselves, but also to sabotage their competitors and kind of manufacture the state of stagnation. It's, in fact, you know what the direct consequence of what happened is in drug discovery, right?
Well, I'm sure it got rolled back dramatically with all of the requirements that we have.
For drug discovery, no, it's still they've been rolled back slightly, and actually the admin has done some good things on this, but it's really drops in a barrel. And what has actually happened is that, do you know where the majority of drug discoveries happen now?
Not aware.
This is according to a new report. It was written up in the Wall Street Journal, but they happen in China. That's where they happen now.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, something of immediate attention. We just need to immediately learn this lesson before it happens with AI.
It seems that some of these companies just have this. I mean, I understand why they want
And
to
I think there
become.
are people who are learning this lesson. I think that's becoming clear. There are people.
Sorry, go ahead. The connection's a little laggy.
Yeah, my bad. But yeah, it's something that I think has become clear to many people within Congress, in both parties, and within the administration. But I think that there's this very common phrase, common I think because it's true, that all the evil needs to do to win is for good people to do nothing, and that's still a concern right now, especially with all of these like really deceptive like doomer attempts to really infiltrate many administrations and offices and so on.
Yeah, I appreciate the rundown. So, last question. Let's get back to close on effort news. What is like the plan of scaling, uncovering more information, the pace of journalism? What does that look like to you in the coming months and years and days ahead?
Yeah, every day we work, the degree of end-to-end automation gets better, both internally and externally, right? But both the tools we're developing and just the general quality of the models. We are hiring as well, especially for writing and editing. One of the things that really I think like not only is bad, but hasn't gotten much better since the original ChatGPT era is writing. Like it's gotten better in terms of like factual accuracy. Like it'll look up things and those things will actually be true. But it just has not. It's kind of shocking how little the writing has gotten better. But anyways, we're hiring. So if you a listener to the Dossier podcast would like to work for Effort News, jobs at effort.news is where you find us. So there's that, and yeah, there'll be a lot more in terms of scaling. There'll be a lot more stories breaking very, very soon.
Yeah, really exciting stuff. And Brian, you have a great X account. What's your X handle?
Brian Chau 57. It's just my name and then 57. BRINCHAU 57.
Yeah, Brian puts a lot of informative stuff into the world, and you can follow him to get the latest scoops from effort.news. But Brian, yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and looking forward to what you guys can accomplish over there. And I strongly encourage my aspiring journalist readers and subscribers to check it out. Maybe give it a shot, and hopefully, Brian will be doing some big hiring in the not so distant future. Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate
Yeah,
you
let's do it.
All right.
Thank you. Great to be here. See you later, Jordan.